we started feeding the king parrots down at Airies Inlet, a native bird that looked quite pretty. Over a number of years, they got quite tame, and now they land on our hands and eat right out of our hands. And it's such a fun thing to do, to hold out your hand and have a bird eating out of the palm of it, and just having a bit of a squawk and a flap, and the mates coming along and everyone having a bit of a go. This year it's become a bit problematic.
Right.
It's become very popular, and now there's too many birds that want the food. And also the cockatoos are getting involved.
Oh, you don't want them.
If a cockatoo thinks there's something in your house that it wants, it'll just break in somehow. It'll just rip seals off windows. And not only that, the king parrots fight amongst themselves now. There's two young males and they're just dickheads. And you try to feed them and they just start squabbling amongst themselves, and it's just kind of ruined the vibe.
Well, I can't help but think perhaps you've got what you deserve, because most of the ecological advice would be don't feed the native animals, because then you make them dependent on that as a food source and it upsets their ability to whatever, and you're almost never feeding them something that's a balanced diet, and most people would say that you probably shouldn't do it. So,
well, look, that is true, but honestly, who hasn't sometime or another?
It is an example. It is an example of one of those things where you're like, no, everybody shouldn't do this. But I could.
There's a sign near our house that says, don't feed bread. That's not a good food source for the local birds.
Yeah.
And so we're like, well, we're feeding them sunflower seeds. We're not like those people.
Sunflower seeds being incredibly high in cholesterol.
Honestly, I'm not certain the sunflower seeds either. Anyway, it just got me wondering about the dynamics of an evolving community or group or habit or anything you do that has a natural trajectory of creating momentum and enthusiasm and bringing new people in. There's a rise and fall.
Yeah, and there almost has to be. That old cliche, the only constant is change, is true. There is no dynamic system in the entire universe that just stays static. Like they always are on gradients and curves. And communities are an example of one. And hopefully everyone's been in a community at some point in their life that felt like it was like catching the wave and getting better.
And then people want to get on because it's so fun. And have you had the experience where you include someone in it because you're having so much fun, and when they arrive, they change the dynamic and you're like, oh.
So, in building the Solo Pro community, I decided from the very beginning that I would cap it at 50, right? And it's currently at 33, and it really feels like it's in this bit. And one of the reasons to cap it at 50 was because I have a suspicion that it might at least stave off
the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't necessarily think it's the number either. It's the phase that the community's in. So there's a fun phase. And my example of it is from years ago when I was running uni events.
Yeah.
And I took to that with far more gusto than I did my degree. And I remember me and a few other people leading the charge to really create new and exciting events. We had the first ever foam party. We had the biggest ever booze cruise. I contacted a boat that had never had a university event. They were used to weddings and things, and negotiated that. And we just had this wildly successful period of a few years of just doing this cool stuff. And I just loved it.
Yeah.
And then we handed it over to the people who'd arrived during or sort of after that had been introduced, who didn't ever know anything else. And I handed them what I thought was a smoothly running operating machine, and it just immediately tanked. Well, maybe not immediately. It worked for maybe another year or two, and then it just completely fell off.
The magic was gone.
And it wasn't until maybe years later that I was reflecting that unless the people running it have the enthusiasm phase, unless you feel like you're contributing to the growth of the exciting bit, then you just can't give it the same energy.
I've seen it a little bit with sporting clubs as well. So like a new sporting club can appear, and it's essentially a small group of friends who've decided to make their own team. And for the first few years, it can be really exciting and they get better and whatever.
And the skill levels are disparate, but it doesn't matter because the sense of social cohesion is fine.
Yeah, and there's this core group and it's just one team and whatever. And then as the club gains legitimacy, then they have to incorporate, and now there's a president and a secretary and a
probably
treasurer.
Someone cares a lot about winning, someone else cares more about the social side of things, the needs diverge.
Exactly. And then you have multiple teams, and there's the good team and the shitter team, and then their needs diverge, and like, there's all this stuff. And by the end, almost no matter how you started it, 10 years later,
It'll
you've
splinter.
just got yet another club.
Yeah, and so I've just been thinking about that and what you can do to just be okay with that. You can't really stop it. And if you're part of a community that's going a bit weird, instead of, like, how do you decide basically when to change or when to give up?
I reckon one of the things about maturity is the way to live a good human life is to know how mature you are and to live to the phase of life that you're in.
I'm about 10 years behind.
Well, that was an accusation I had of you a while ago. You've mostly addressed it at this point, but yes, exactly. And you know how sometimes you see a kid who's trying to be older than they are and you're like, no, just like let it come, like be the age that you are. And equally you see someone who's trying to be younger than they are and you're like, nah, dude. And there's something about just embracing the age that you're at and the phase of life that you're at. And I reckon one of the keys to a good life is not to fight the progress and the change, and instead to just be like, no, well, this is who I am now, and embrace that.
It's no one's failing that it's time to move on.
No, exactly. And the only constant is change, right? And so, and I think as a community, it's kind of similar. Don't try to hang on to that fizzy, bubbly, exciting early phase for longer than it actually lives. Like, when it's happening, enjoy it and embrace it and use it as best as you can. And then when it's over, well, that's okay. Now you're in a slightly more mature phase and you can embrace whatever the good aspects of that are.
Nice. Anyway, I'm sad about not getting to feed the birds anymore.
I think they'll be better off in the long run.